Language is powerful, and as English teachers, we want you to understand how arguments, language, and persuasive devices can be used to influence. For this reason, we occasionally ask you to write what is known as an argument analysis essay. We provide you with some kind of persuasive text. It could be an editorial, a letter to the editor, a speech, or a cartoon. We want you to deconstruct this text, explain how the writer makes arguments, uses language, persuasive devices, and even visuals like photographs and cartoons to persuade an audience. Before you get started, you need to read the text carefully and annotate it, identifying the issue, contention, tone, audience, arguments, language, and persuasive devices used throughout the piece. When you're done, the page is probably going to look a little bit like this. Let's talk about some of these things and how you can identify them. An issue is simply an important topic or problem that sparks debate or discussion. Using the word should can often help identify an issue. Here are some examples. If euthanasia should be legalised, whether Australians should celebrate Halloween, if soft drugs should be decriminalised. Developing a clear understanding of the issues that the writer is exploring is your first step towards analysing the argument that they're making. Contention refers simply to a writer's point of view. What do they believe? What do they think should happen? Do they think that soft drugs should be decriminalised, or that Halloween is a magical time of year, or that horse racing is barbaric and should be banned? Beginning a sentence with the word "that" forces you to focus on the writer's contention. Here are some examples. That reality television is a waste of time. That teens should have access to private medical appointments. That fox baiting should be prohibited. Identifying the arguments that a writer makes is a bit more challenging. Be on the lookout for the main points or ideas the writer presents. When identifying arguments, the word "that" is very useful once again, helping you to state a position or point of view. Here are some examples. The writer argues that Halloween brings communities together. He suggests that fox baiting is cruel. The writer contends that the time we spend watching reality TV is better spent pursuing our dreams. Sometimes imagining where you'd put subheadings in a piece of writing can help you identify these main points. Remember that an argument is a point that supports the writer's overall contention. Tone is a word that refers to the way a text sounds. The tone of a piece of writing or speech can be very persuasive. If you can, try to read the piece aloud. What does it sound like? How might tone help to persuade an audience? While I can give you a list of commonly used tone words, the best way to develop your understanding of tone is to read widely and think about the varied ways it can contribute to an argument. Keep in mind that in a single piece of writing, the tone may shift several times. Try to capture the subtleties of these tonal shifts in your writing. Another important consideration is who the article's been written for. Identify the intended audience so you can start to unpack some of the language choices the writer has made and explain their intended effect. Remember that not everyone responds to a piece of writing in the same way. What is it about the language and persuasive devices that might influence this particular audience? When you're annotating a text, also look out for particular words or phrases the writer has used. Out of all of these possible alternatives, what effect might this particular word have on an intended audience? As you're reading, start to identify persuasive techniques. You've probably learned a lot about these language devices in class and know that each of them can persuade in different ways. In addition to identifying these techniques, consider how they are intended to influence a particular audience. What is it about this use of alliteration, or this appeal to sympathy, that might be persuasive to them? Before you start writing, it's a good idea to make a brief plan of your essay. This is about organising your thoughts and your annotations, identifying key arguments and the persuasive techniques used to make them. Even getting down a few words will help bring structure and logic to your analysis. An important part of this process is clearly identifying some of the arguments the writer makes and the language choices and persuasive devices used to support them. If you're going to analyse an argument, you need to get a few things straight in your introduction. To remember what you need to include, I love the acronym FATCAT. Remember that the information doesn't need to be in this order. It's just a way of remembering the things you should include in your introduction, including the form. Is it an editorial, opinion piece, letter to the editor, or a speech? The author. The title, contention, or the writer's point of view, the intended audience of the piece, and its tone. Here's an example of what an introduction might look like. After writing an article about his dogs dying from 1080 foxbait, writer Dimitri Kakmi penned another opinion piece titled "They're Pests but Cruelty is Inexcusable," sharing the words of support he'd received from regional Australia. Kakmi argues in an emotive tone that foxbaiting is cruel and barbaric, attempting to persuade both voters and lawmakers that we should abandon this practice. With your introduction complete, it's time to move on to your body paragraphs. When you're analysing an argument, each body paragraph will focus on an argument that the writer puts forward. You can use the acronym AAPEE to remember the structure of your body paragraphs. Begin a body paragraph by clearly identifying an argument that the writer is making. Then start to analyse the argument. How do they make their point? Avoid simply listing persuasive techniques and try to explain how these techniques have been used with the intended audience in mind. Then identify a persuasive technique, give an example, and explain its intended effect on the audience. You can repeat this last bit as many times as you like. Let's take a look at what a body paragraph might look like. O'Brien argues that parents should trust the professionalism of doctors, allowing teens to have private medical appointments. In making this argument, O'Brien recognises that when it comes to their children, parents are likely to be swayed by the advice of experts, which means she approaches this argument in a logical manner, relying heavily on evidence and the suggestion that parents should trust medical professionals. She supports this argument with the use of evidence, referring to a new research report from Victorian doctors which indicates that children should have the right to private medical appointments. This use of expert opinion suggests that O'Brien's contention has widespread support by a trusted body of professionals, and her use of evidence positions parents to contemplate whether their right to know surpasses their children's health. Furthermore, O'Brien uses the positive connotations of the word professional when she states there are times when parents should defer to other professionals whose job it is to protect our kids. The word professional has connotations of experience and training, further emphasising the credibility of doctors in the eyes of parents who might be wary of allowing their teenagers to have private medical appointments. The secret with these paragraphs is to clearly identify the argument, discuss how the argument's presented, and then dive into the language choices and persuasive devices that support that argument. It might seem like a lot at first, but you'll pretty soon get used to this structure after you've used it a few times. You can conclude an argument essay by referring to how the writer makes their final argument. Their last paragraph will often be a final plea to the reader, a call to action, or a dramatic statement intended to linger in their reader's mind. Conclude your essay by reflecting on how they do this.